that come from you and listeners. You're going to get a chance to hear some a cappella singing, a bit later on. What would you like to share with the listeners?
There is. The reason I never liked poetry when I was at school. I loved Shakespeare, but as a dramatist, that's why I wanted to act and or sing when I was at school. And as I mentioned, they took me out of that stream, known as the B stream, for some reason. And so I've lost my train of thought, which is always helpful. So I started doing a little bit of acting when I was just over 30 to try and catch up with what I hadn't been able to do when I was at school. And also what I did, I went off and decided to do some O-levels because I hadn't done them at school. And it was during, I was at City and East London College in Bun Hill Row. That's in East London. And I was doing English O-level, and it was about the third week of the O-level. And I remember being given 7 titles by the tutor, and I was supposed to come up with an essay by the next morning. And I had a problem with essays for some reason. When I was at the convent, I remember writing essays, and I won't actually tell you what the tutor said to me. She wasn't a nun, she was a lay teacher, and but she did tell me that she thought what I wrote was rubbish. That's being polite. So I wasn't feeling very confident when the tutor, I can't remember his name, when he said, "Okay, I want you to write an essay and bring it in the morning." So I went home that afternoon, and I started looking, and I thought, well, I'm bound to be able to concoct an essay from 7 titles, And, well, I couldn't. I started writing, and nothing happened. And in the end, I thought, well, I'm going to get in the bath, and I'll get in the bath, and I'll relax, put some bath oil in the bath, and I'll relax and see what happens. And I left a pad and a pencil, actually, on the side of the bath. And I couldn't think of an essay, and I started to panic, and I got washed, and I thought, then I thought, well, I'll get washed again. Then I thought, well, no, that's not going to do it. That's silly. That's just getting washed twice. Think of something. And then suddenly, I just started to get out the bath and get dry. Then some sort of rhyme started going through my head, and I thought, that's odd. I don't like poetry. What on earth's going on? So I remember I wrapped the towel around me, and I just knelt on the floor in the bathroom. And I got the pencil and paper and just started scribbling away. And it wasn't as though I was really giving it much thought. It just kind of streamed out. I ended up writing 7 poems, 1 poem for each title of, for this literary thing I was supposed to be doing. I thought, well, that's it. I've written poetry. I mean, I'll just go in the morning and see what he says. Anyway, I went into college the next morning, and I felt although I was an adult, it was an adult college, I felt quite nervous, and I thought, this is it, they're going to chuck me off the O-level course. And I'd wanted to get a few O-levels ever since I'd walked out of school. I realised it was a dumb thing to do, and so I'd always felt that I hadn't achieved very much. So I stood there at his desk, like a 5-year-old really, and I said, "Excuse me, Mr. whatever his name was, I'm really sorry, but I have a problem with essays. I just couldn't get it. I couldn't do one. But I've written some poetry." Well, he almost snatched it from my hand, and he looked at it and he said, "Would you mind reading this out?" And I realised he wasn't trying to humiliate me. So I stood up in front of the blackboard, and I started, and I read 3 of them, and he was absolutely thrilled. And then he whispered to me. He said, "I've never had a pupil who's written poetry before when they've been asked to write an essay." So I thought, oh, that's okay. And I stopped feeling nervous, and I thought, I'm not going to get chucked off the O-level course. And then just before I went to my desk, he said, "Look, I'm going to get on with the lesson." He said, "But if you feel like writing anything whilst I'm tutoring, just go ahead. Just you go ahead." So I did. And I just started writing. And about a month later, I was at the National Poetry Society in Earl's Court reading my stuff, and they encouraged me to... I published a book then using their equipment and their paper and everything. And it had about 20 or 25 poems in it. But then it was difficult knowing how to sell poetry, you know. I couldn't suddenly turn into a merchant and start selling stuff, so I was more or less giving the books away. But at least I was reading at the National Poetry Society, and then I joined the Hackney Writers, because I was living in somewhere near Stoke Newington at that time. And I started reading there and doing some more writing, and I got published about another 2 or 3 times. And then when I moved to Highgate, it was more of the singing thing that was going on, to be honest. The Old Time Music Hall and stuff. And for a while I didn't write. And then I started writing song lyrics, because I decided that I liked music with lyrics. So that although I've got poems that are strictly poems, I started, writing song lyrics as well. But to date, I've only written about 17 or 18 songs, and none of them are published yet. But I'm thinking about that, maybe eventually anyway, recording and getting them out.
That's good. That's for the future, and yeah, well, it can be tricky, converting poems into songs that are singable.
Yeah.
You've got a couple of poems with you for the late Princess Diana. Would you like to share that poem with the listeners?
Yeah, I would. I thought a lot of the late Princess of Wales, because she was very, very young, and she undertook to marry the most eligible guy in England at the time, and I just, I was astounded at how brave she was, and I was, like a lot of people, I was really heartbroken when she died so tragically. So hang on, let me just pick up this book.
Yes, and listeners, again, I hope you take a little inspiration from Gabrielle and her sharing some of the sparks that have helped her on the road as a poet. The teacher who gave her a break when she was supposed to give an essay, but gave some poetry instead. So take heart from this lady, and she's going to recite a very beautiful poem now.
Thanks, Pat. Yeah, this one's called The Flower Bed, and I wrote this. It was when we were all in mourning. Must be 10 years ago now or more, 11. And I wrote it because all I can remember about the day was that there was no traffic noise, and the air there was this wonderful smell of flowers. So here it is. It's called The Flower Bed. Then perfect silence stilled the air, and flowers lay creased and soft, like the crumpled silk gown on her wedding day. The mourners grew, and their flowers spread in mounds of gentle petals on the massive perfumed bed. So silent was the milling crowd that the moving air seemed loud. Then quiet tears kissed the ground in priceless pools that tried to speak. Amidst the scented silence, no words were ever found. And I took some photographs while I was there, and the one of the photos got published in the book. I got paid £5 for the for the photograph, but nothing for the poetry. But there's another poem. Hang on, page 7. On this one. Although I actually wrote 5 or 6 during those 3 days, these were the 2 that did get published. This one is about the paparazzi, and it's called The Final Chase. Imposing, ogling, creeping, crawling, climbing, hiding, waiting, staring, searching, seeking, shoving, pushing, peeping, peering, snooping, stooping, jostling, jeering, clamouring, crazed mob say that's their job. Engines growling, mopeds roaring, hooting, screeching, chasing, speeding, cameras flashing, faster, wilder, unleashed, manic, merciless mob. But search no more, for your quarry has fled, and in a Paris tunnel lies dead.
Yes, and that's so true. You know, the final chase. Yeah, Diana. You know, she was just a great matter of interest to people all over the world. And one of the things that I really found, you know, were really worthy of her is that, you know, she got involved with the landmine issue. You know, and demining, and you know, let's get rid of these cluster bombs and these mines, because you know they just, you know, injure ordinary people. And she was, you know, even she was so extraordinary that she had that interconnection with just ordinary everyday people who, you know, really connected with her. You know, and you know, it took a long time for, you know, this whole sad affair to finally come to an end, you know, with the inquest that was just closed last month, you know. And yeah, Diana, she may be gone, but she won't be forgotten.